Hi, I'm Alexandra, and this is my creative critical reflection for AICE Media Studies. So here I have the Cambridge reflection questions, and I'm going to answer them one by one. Number 1. How does your product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? So while I grab a soda, I'll explain how my film, The Last Stop, uses horror conventions. My film opening, The Last Stop, is a 2-minute psychological horror about 4 teenagers who stop at a deserted park rest stop near sundown, and one of them disappears. The strongest horror convention I used is isolation. Neale explains, genre works through repetition and difference. I used the familiar horror element of isolation, but introduced a difference by making the male character, Marcos, disappear first. Examples of isolation include the empty park, the locked restroom, and finally, the approaching darkness that signifies danger. The next topic I wanted to talk about is the narrative structure, because we really wanted to pull the audience in. Narratively, I used enigma codes. Roland Barthes explains that enigma codes create questions that drive the story forward. In our short story intro, we never see the threat, so we never fully understand why Marcos feels so uneasy, which builds suspense. This also follows. Todorov's structure is that equilibrium then leads to destruction. In our film, the equilibrium, which is the friends taking the road trip, then leads to the disruption, which is the isolated setting and Marcos' disappearance. This ends up creating a narrative imbalance. Our film also heavily relies on semiotics. Using Barthes' theory, the abandoned objects act as signifiers, which have deeper meanings. For instance, the keys signify control and escape. The backpack suggests teenagers' identity. The flashlight represents safety. This also reflects Levi-Strauss's idea of binary opposition, light versus darkness. Our film focuses on teenagers, which we filmed as impulsive and affected by peer pressure, which reflects common horror portrayals. However, we challenge typical gender expectations. Instead of using a female victim, we use the male, Marcos, as the first victim. Through Stuart Hall's Encoding and Decoding Theory, I encoded this as a genre subversion, which audiences may decode it as either female empowerment or a male's increased vulnerability. So overall, isolation, narrative enigma, symbolic objects, and representation work together to create psychological suspense. So before I move on to question 2, I'd like to introduce you all to my blog co-writer. So let's take a look at my second question, which reads, how does your product engage with audiences, and how would it be distributed as a real media text? I'm going to answer this question as I take Paris for a walk. My film mainly engages the audience through suspense and mystery, according to Blumler and Katz's uses and gratifications theory. The enigma structure and cliffhanger fulfill that specific need. The opening also engages the audience through pacing and tension. The film starts with a realistic situation, 4 teenagers stopping because the girls need to use the restroom, as the characters split up. Marcos' nervous behavior acts as a warning sign for the audience. So even before the disappearance, the male character's restricted viewpoint, never showing the threat, places the audience in the same uncertainty as the character. Marcos screams and the film cuts. Although the theorist Propp identifies traditional roles like hero and victim, we disrupted this expectation by shifting the vulnerability to Marcos. In terms of distribution as a real media text, The Last Stop would work best as a digital short film, distributed on platforms like YouTube, where psychological horror performs well. It could also be submitted to student film festivals and be promoted through social media teaser clips. So our opening engages the audience through enigma, suspense, and genre subversion, and it would be distributed digitally with cross-platform promotion. For questions 3 and 4, I'll be switching to a digital portfolio. We hope to see you in the next CCR.